Onto your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. I am the host, Matt McPeak. Thank you for joining me this week. We have our last episode of the season before we start our weekly preview episodes. I can't believe it's actually here. Was afraid we weren't going to get a football season this year, but it looks like it's going to happen. So since last week, we've had a pretty big move in fantasy football. We had Leonard Fournette signs with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on a one-year deal for $2 million. The Bucs now have 7 running backs on their roster. This backfield has been one of the most volatile in the league all off-season. It started off as Ronald Jones's backfield, and they drafted Keyshawn Vaughn and Raymond Calais. They signed LaShawn McCoy about a month ago, and now they bring in Leonard Fournette. Originally, I was pretty excited about this backfield. I thought with a whole off-season that Ronald Jones would that he apparently was working really hard on getting better as a pass catcher, and after seeing Dario Ogunbowale look pretty good as their third down back last year, I actually took Ogunbowale as the last pick in one of my dynasty leagues in July because I thought he had that third down role locked down and that he would catch a bunch of passes from Tom Brady. We all know how much Tom Brady loves to target his running backs, but now I have no idea what to make of this backfield. I have no idea who's going to actually make the team. I find it hard to believe that they're going to go into week 1 with 7 running backs. I don't know if Fournette was brought there to strictly be a goal line guy or if the Bucs, instead of using him as their primary back, what exactly is going to happen? Is Ronald Jones going to split carries with Fournette, or is he just a change of pace guy? Does Ogunbowale still have that third down role? Who knows what the hell's going to happen with Sean McCoy? He could play 1 game, he could play 5 games, he could play the whole season. Nobody knows. I wish I could tell you what I would do as far as when to draft these guys, but honestly, at this point, I think I'm going to just completely ignore all of them. I usually designate a few backfields every year as ones that I want to avoid, unless the value just gets too good during draft day. Usually that's been the Patriots backfield, except for James White and PPR leagues, but this year I think the Bucs clearly are that team to avoid. Yes, Fournette and Ronald Jones will both probably finish as top 30 backs, but it's going to be such a pain in the ass trying to figure out when to start these guys, whether or not they can be counted on as RB1s, RB2s, are they flexes? Got to turn this down for a second. Sorry about that. And the only guy that I'd really be willing to take a dart throw on right now is Ogunbowale still. I think he will catch the most passes out of all of them. Really, the only reason why I would still take him is A, because you can get him in the with pretty much your last pick, and B, if it is a full PPR, again, I think he's worth taking. If it's not full PPR, I wouldn't take him. I'm sorry, I got to respond to this. Sorry, guys. I will call you back after the podcast. Look at that. I was actually doing a draft on Wednesday night when the signing was made public. Fournette was drafted as the 9th pick in the 9th round of a 12-team full PPR league. Of course, I'm the idiot that drafted Ronald Jones. I didn't even really want him going into this year. It was the first pick in the 6th round. I was picking in the 12th slot, and I wanted to get Kareem Hunt with my 5th pick, but he ended up going as the 4th pick in the 5th round, so I pretty much missed him by about half a round. By far the highest that I've seen him go in the 6 drafts that I've had so far this year. I knew I wanted to get a 3rd running back with one of my 2 picks there at the 4-5 turn. Or I'm sorry, the 5-6 turn. And I figured Jones had the biggest upside at that pick. At this point, I didn't know Fournette was about to be signed, but if I knew Fournette was going to be signed, I would have taken Tariq Cohen in the 6th round there, because I think Cohen is going to be great again in PPR leagues. Again, he was 2nd in the team in targets for the past 2 years for the Chicago Bears. But we will get to that draft. I'm going to go over a couple picks that stood out to me in a hot minute. There were a few other picks that really surprised me, so we'll get to that. But before I do that, last week I joined the Mike and Mike Man Hour show to talk some fantasy football. I had prepared a set of players that I was excited about for pretty much each round in the draft, and a list of guys that I wasn't all that excited about. I was actually only able to get to the 5th round on that show. Me and Mike were kind of spitballing and having some good conversation. I'd suggest you go back and check that episode out, especially if you're somewhat new to fantasy. Pretty good conversation that we had there. So let me jump over to that list of players. So like I said, I got up to the 5th round, which was pretty much the quarterback round, if you will. But my favorite pick as far as 6th round running backs, and again, I pretty much stick to Fantasy Pros ADP as the Bible. I think they do an awesome job of collecting the average draft position from all of the major sites. I go through and I print out, the top 280 or whatever, and I highlight the players that I like, and I try and figure out which ones are going to be available at what spots. And unfortunately, when you're picking at the turn like that, when you have the 12th and the 13th pick, and then you don't pick again until 24, you essentially end up reaching on a lot of players. But that's all right with me, because I like to get the guys that I like, and I have no problem with taking somebody that maybe isn't going in the majority of leagues at where I'm taking them. But that's neither here nor there. So my favorite 6th round running back, according to ADP, is Kareem Hunt. Now, again, he did go in the 5th round in this full PPR league that I was in last night. But he missed the first half of the season last year with his suspension, but from week 10 on, Kareem Hunt was the number 17 running back in full PPR. He averaged just about 10 touches a game, which I think will probably get closer to 12 or 13 with this new head coach, Kevin Stefanski, in Cleveland. I think Hunt is one of the best mid-round running backs in PPR. If you're somebody that does want to go with the whole zero RB strategy, I think Kareem Hunt should be your target, even if you have to take him in the 5th round. Maybe you go wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, wide receiver, and then go with your first running back in the 5th round. And I think Kareem Hunt being that first running back is the way to go if you are going to play the whole zero RB strategy. I laid it out in the last week's episode how zero RB, although it's something that I've loved to do in the past, it just doesn't seem to make sense to me this year. There's just so many wide receivers in the middle rounds. I just think it makes way more sense this year to go get yourself 2 running backs to start the draft. Another mid-round running back that I really like this year, Cam Akers. I've never been too big on drafting rookies, but this year is different. There's so many rookies that are in really good spots to be successful, and Cam Akers is definitely one of them. The Rams used their first pick in this year's draft on him for a reason. I think he's going to fit perfectly with that Rams zone rushing scheme. He's going to catch a whole bunch of passes, will probably play on 3rd down. He could be one of the better values in fantasy football this year if he ends up getting anywhere close to the amount of touches that Todd Gurley has been getting over the past few years. I'm not saying that Cam Akers is the next Todd Gurley. All I'm saying is that he does fit that system very well. My favorite 6th-round wide receivers right now, Stephon Diggs. The Bills gave up a boatload to bring him to Buffalo. He is the first legitimate number 1 wide receiver that Josh Allen has ever had. Allen needs to improve on his accuracy, but he can throw the ball to the moon, and I think Diggs is going to be great in Buffalo. We saw Diggs last year. He ran pretty much the entire route tree. He ran short, intermediate, deep routes. He was all over the field. He's probably not a number 1 wide receiver in fantasy, but I think he should be a pretty solid number 2. Tyler Boyd's another guy. He's coming off of back-to-back 1,000-yard plus receiving yard seasons. He's got a lot of competition for targets with A.J. Green back and John Ross and that rookie T. Higgins there, but I think I think Tyler Boyd has the best role on the team. I think he has the most solidified role on the team. John Ross is really nothing more than a deep threat. He's going to get maybe 4 or 5 targets a game on some deep posts, on some swing routes, maybe on some jet sweeps or whatever. A.J. Green is a huge wild card. He's actually still questionable with a hamstring injury. I'm pretty sure I saw that he missed Wednesday's practice because of that hamstring injury. We don't know if he's going to play 1 game or 15 games, and T. Higgins is a rookie. So, again, I really don't see Boyd, although there are a lot of mouths there to feed, I just don't think that Boyd has all that much of a threat as far as targets go. I think he's in the best position on the team to really excel as the number 1, especially with that number 1 overall quarterback on the team now. So let's get into the 7th round, which I think is one of the most interesting rounds in fantasy football right now. You got Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and Matt Ryan. They're all going within a few picks of each other. And then a whole bunch of guys that could be either huge sleepers or massive busts this year, right? So you got tight ends, Tyler Higbee, Hunter Henry, and Gronk are all going in the 7th round. Higbee was a PPR machine in the second half of last year. Rams head coach Sean McVay has said this offseason that he needs to keep his tight ends more involved throughout the year. And then you got Hunter Henry, who could be a big-time value as the number 8 tight end with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, and more importantly, Mike Williams missing the first few games of the season. I think Hunter Henry is clearly going to be the red zone guy. We've seen it plenty of times with these rushing quarterbacks that the tight ends generally are their first read. They're not looking super deep down the field. They're looking towards the middle of the field, and that's usually where you see these tight ends. So I think Hunter Henry could be a great pick. Actually, last night in the 8th and 9th rounds, I took Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki, who we'll get to in a little bit. 2 guys that I think could be huge breakout tight ends this year. So I took both of them, hoping that I hit on one of them. Maybe they both hit. I can use one of them as trade bait, or I just play the matchups between the 2 of them. We'll see what happens. And then you got Gronk coming out of retirement to join Brady down in Tampa Bay. These guys could probably complete 8 of 10 passes with their eyes shut. Gronk has never played with so much talent around him. He's going to be wide open on some of these routes this year. And I think he's going to be a red zone monster in 2020, specifically because of that chemistry that he has with Tom Brady. The 7th round wide receivers are also super interesting with Julian Edelman, Michael Gallup, and Will Fuller all going back to back to start off the round. So we got 3 tight ends, 3 quarterbacks, and 3 wide receivers all going in the 7th round that I think could really have some pretty good value. Edelman's draft stock has really taken a hit with Brady being gone, but Cam Newton is a former MVP of this league. I think he'll quickly recognize that Edelman's elite route running, it makes him the best receiver on the team, and he will get Edelman the ball. I have no doubt about that. Michael Gallup is the forgotten player in Dallas. He will probably benefit the most from CeeDee Lamb joining the team. I expect CeeDee Lamb to kind of play in the slot the majority of the time, although I'm sure the 3 of them, along with Amari Cooper, they're all going to be moving around all over the field. It's going to be a hell of a time for defenses to cover all these guys, especially with Zeke coming out of the backfield, and we all know Dak can run. Gallup is another one of these third-year wide receivers primed and ready for a breakout. He had 113 targets and 1,100 yards last year. I think he could do it again, no problem, really. And then there's Will Fuller, the ultimate boomer bust player in fantasy football. When healthy, he has a real connection with Deshaun Watson. He had a 56-point game and a 21-point game last year, but he also had multiple games with 5 points or less, and that's in full PPR. So if he could just stay on the field with no Hopkins this season, I think Fuller could be the number one guy as far as targets go, but he could also pull his hamstring week 2 and miss the first half of the season. So Will Fuller is a guy that, although he has massive upside, I want nothing to do with him. He's just he's too injury prone, man. I can't deal with it. There's 2 guys going in the 8th round that I'm very much interested in, especially more particularly in PPR leagues. But that's Tariq Cohen. As I said, he's been second on the Bears in targets for the past 2 years, and and the lead back David Montgomery apparently has a groin issue and will miss a few weeks. So Cohen could be huge in the first few games of the year. And as far as an 8th round running back goes, a guy that you're going to be able to play in the beginning of the season, I think it's great value. Then you got Christian Kirk, another wide receiver going into his 3rd year. The Cardinals used 5 wide receivers on 33% of their snaps last year. That was the most in the league. Yes, Kirk has Fitzgerald and Hopkins there getting a lot of targets, but that just means that Kirk will draw the weakest coverage of the 3. And defenses are going to be paying so much attention to Fitz and D-Hop. Plus, there's plenty to go around in this fast-paced offense that Cliff Kingsbury wants to run. You know, he wants to get as many plays off as he can. Then we get to the 9th and 10th round. If you haven't taken a tight end by the 9th round, you're in luck, because there's a group of 5 tight ends going in this range that could easily finish as top 10 guys by the end of the year. The first one being Noah Fant. My least favorite of this set of 5 guys. He's super talented, and he's on an offense that will likely focus a little bit more on passing the ball this year than last. The Broncos also drafted 2 other wide receivers and another tight end in this year's draft, so he's got a whole lot of competition for targets. But when it comes to tight ends, even in PPR leagues, all you're really hoping for are touchdowns. Obviously, if you have a guy like Darren Waller last year that's going to catch 60, 70 balls, that's a big difference. But at the end of the day, you're just looking for these tight ends to score touchdowns. And with so much attention going to that trio of wide receivers of Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and KJ Hamler, Noah Fant could easily sneak through the middle of defenses and catch a deep ball or 2 every game, or just use his freakish athleticism in the red zone. Then you got Hayden Hurst, who the Falcons traded for, could have a breakout year in Atlanta. Matt Ryan has said that he's the most athletic tight end that he's ever played with, which is a pretty ridiculous thing to say when you consider he used to throw the ball to the tight end god, the Hall of Famer Tony Gonzalez. Then you got Austin Hooper, who the Falcons let walk away in free agency, could also have a big year in Cleveland. He'll be playing with one of the best pairs of wide receivers in Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry, but Hooper is used to playing with a great set of wide receivers from his time in Atlanta, and Kevin Stefanski loves using his tight ends, so I think Hooper could have one of the best seasons as far as touchdowns go this year. I don't think he's going to come close to his high water mark as far as receptions go, but I think he could easily score 9 or 10 touchdowns. And he's another guy. He's going really late, people. I mean, he's a perfect example of why you do not need to waste a 2nd or 3rd round pick on a tight end, because you can get a pretty good one in the 10th round here. Next is T.J. Hawkinson. He is the 5th guy. No, he is number 4. Sorry. He exploded out of the gate last year in his rookie year with the Lions. Had 131 yards and a touchdown on 6 catches against the Cardinals, who showed us to be one of the worst defenses of all time as far as defending tight ends. They gave up 16 touchdowns to tight ends last year. But then he really cooled off. He had 5 games with only 1 catch or no catches. He had a concussion He lost his quarterback, Matthew Stafford, to an injury, but I think he rebounds. I think he has a good sophomore year. I don't think I'd want to rely on him as my only tight end, but he's definitely worth a 10th round flyer, specifically because of his athleticism. He was a top 5 pick in the draft 2 years ago. They really like him in Detroit. The last of this set of 5, one of the guys that I'm most excited about, I've been trying to get him in every single one of my drafts, and that's Mike Gesicki. He's going in the 10th, the 11th round. He had one of the highest ADOTs among tight ends last year, which stands for average depth of target. Basically, how deep is he running when he's targeted? He was basically a wide receiver last year, and this year, with the 2 Dolphin wide receivers opted out, I think they're going to really need him. It's going to be Devontae Parker, Preston Williams, and Mike Gesicki. He'll probably be second or third on the team in targets by the season's end, and he really showed us last year. He's a good player, man. So I'm excited about him, and he's another one of these guys that I think if you want to wait until the 9th or 10th round to get your tight end, I think you can do a lot worse than Mike Gesicki. But again, if you're picking in the 9th round and you don't have a tight end yet, I really think this is the round you need to go and get one of these guys, because not sure if they're really going to be there for you in the 10th or 11th round. Late round flyers at running back. Gotta love the late round flyers at running back. So Boston Scott, he'll be the number 2 back in Philly, and Miles Sanders is already dealing with a shoulder injury. Plus, I mentioned earlier, the Eagles wide receivers are already pretty beat up. Then you got Antonio Gibson. He's one of a whole crew of Washington football team running backs that could be the guy after Darius Geis was cut a few weeks ago. Head coach Ron Rivera has said he reminds him of Christian McCaffrey with his receiving abilities. He probably won't get anywhere near as many carries as we'd like to see him get, maybe 2 or 3 a game with all those other running backs that they have, but he should definitely lead the team in targets among running backs. Little note here, ADP has him going in the 11th round, but Gibson went as the number 2 pick in the 8th round in my 12-team full PPR draft last night. I was not expecting him to go that early. I was really hoping to be able to get him in the 10th round, but it did not work out for me. Another running back that has some big pass-catching upside. He has way more value in PPR leagues, and that's Nyheim Hines. He's got Marlon Mack and the rookie Jonathan Taylor there. But the Colts have one of, if not the best offensive lines in football. And with Phillip Rivers there, Hines should see a whole bunch of targets. He'll probably be their 3rd down back and will most likely be on the field the most on the team when the team is down in the 4th quarter. Rivers has shown that he loves to dump the ball off to his running backs. He has no problem checking it down. So I love Hines as a late-round pick. And another guy who's kind of emerged since the Leonard Fournette cut, and that's Chris Thompson. With Fournette gone and the rookie from last year, Raquel Armstead, projected to be the lead back for the Jaguars, I think Chris Thompson has some real value in PPR leagues as a guy that has proven to us that he can catch the ball. So I took him with the first pick in the 13th round last night, which may have been a little high, but picking at the turn, like I said earlier, you kind of are forced to reach on some guys. A couple more late-round flyers, tight ends Jack Doyle and Chris Herndon, 2 guys that should catch a bunch of balls. Quarterbacks Gardner Minshew. I think the Jags' defense is going to be horrible. I think the Jaguars are going to have to throw the ball a lot. We saw Nick Foles get traded away, so Gardner Minshew has that starting job on lockdown. Phillip Rivers playing behind probably the best offensive line he's ever going to play behind, and with one of my favorite head coaches in the league, Frank Reich. I think Frank Reich's really going to get the best out of him. And then you got Cam Newton, who is actually going in, I think it's the 14th round right now, which is just ridiculous. Again, quarterback position is extremely deep. That's the other position that you really do not have to draft a guy in the first couple rounds. Pretty much if you want a top 5 guy, get him in the 5th. If not, just wait it out, man, because you're going to get plenty of guys like this. So, like I said, in that full PPR light draft that I was in last night, a bunch of picks really stood out to me. Drew Brees went 2 picks before Kyler Murray. Now, this was a league that it's full PPR, but it's 5 points for passing touchdown, right in the middle between the 4 and the 6 that you usually see. It's a point for every 20 passing yards instead of 25, so I can kind of see why getting one of these pocket passing quarterbacks and not a rushing quarterback may be a little more appealing, but to me it's ridiculous. Kyler Murray, I think, is going to have an awesome year, and that rushing upside is too awesome to pass up. Austin Hooper was the 15th tight end selected behind Jared Cook, Chris Herndon, and Dallas Goedert. Hayden Hurst went at the end of the 6th round, another guy that I had my eyes on, and I was going to try and get him in the 8th or 9th, but he went super early. CeeDee Lamb went before Jarvis Landry, Tyler Boyd, and Michael Gallup. Again, this is full PPR, so that was a little surprising to me. And then Chase Edmonds went before Duke Johnson, went before Naheem Hines and Keyshawn Vaughn. And it was not the Kenyon Drake owner that made that Edmonds pick. So that was definitely interesting to me. So that's the full PPR league draft that I was in last night. That's a whole bunch of players that I like in drafts. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that are still holding out to the last minute to have your drafts because of how ridiculously crazy this year is going to be. But let's get into this Thursday night football preview. I can't believe we got Thursday night football coming up in 1 week exactly. Opening night to the NFL season is now only 1 week away. I really can't believe it. I'm so excited. Right now on Thursday, September 3rd, the Chiefs are a minus 410 favorite. So basically anybody that's new to gambling, that means you got to pay $400 to win 100. Not worth it to me. The Texans are getting 9.5 points on the road. Usually we see road teams getting at least 3 points no matter what. 9.5 is a lot to take or to give. And the over-under is set at 53.5 right now. So the last time these two teams met was in the divisional round of last year's playoffs. The Texans jumped out to a 21-0 lead in the first quarter. The Chiefs exploded for 28 points in the second quarter. They scored another 23 points in the second half, while the Texans only put up another 10 points after jumping out to that 21-0 lead. There was 82 points total scored. It was a wild game. It was great for daily fantasy players. Travis Kelce scored 3 times in that second quarter. Damian Williams also had a pretty big game. He scored 3 times himself. He had 68 total yards with a pair of catches on 6 targets. Tyreek Hill had a pretty pedestrian game. He caught 3 of 4 targets for 41 yards, and he also fumbled. For the Texans, it was pretty much the Deshaun Watson show, as it usually is. Had 388 passing yards, had 2 touchdowns, but he was sacked 4 times. He also had 37 rushing yards, and he scored the team's only rushing touchdown. DeAndre Hopkins did have over 100 receiving yards on 9 catches, but it was a pretty significant performance. With all that being said, there are really only 2 significant changes to the personnel on these two teams since the last meeting as far as offense goes. Damian Williams is out, and the rookie Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be most likely the starting running back for the Chiefs. And DeAndre Hopkins is gone, but Brandon Cooks is now there in Houston along with David Johnson. If I were to bet this game, I would not touch that money line. Minus 480 or 410, whatever it is just way too high of a price to pay for a team in week 1. Just don't know what the hell is going to happen in week 1. I'd also stay away from that 9.5 point spread because unless the Chiefs have another massive explosion like they did in that second quarter of last year's game, I think the Texans still have enough firepower to keep this game within 10 points. I might consider taking that under 53.5 solely because this is the first time this season that that these teams are going to be in live action. This offseason has had very little training camp, no preseason. They've barely hit each other, so I think the first few weeks of the season are going to be very, very sloppy. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot of injuries. I think we're going to see a boatload of penalties, and I think it's going to be just an extremely sloppy brand of football for the first few weeks. Usually the first few weeks are like that anyway, even with 4 preseason games, and now without four preseason games, it's probably going to be very, very tough to watch. I haven't seen any props available yet, but the only one that I would really be looking at is Travis Kelce to score a touchdown. We saw him score 3 times in about 10 minutes last year against this Texans team. The Texans allowed the 9th most fantasy points to tight ends last year, and they really haven't made any changes on their defense as far as addressing that. I think they drafted a corner or a safety, with like the 5th or 6th pick. Nothing significant there, and they really haven't brought any free agents in of worthy of any note as far as defending tight ends. Tyreek Hill is questionable for the game as far as his hamstring strain goes, but I'm sure he'll play. But will he be 100%? We don't know. Hamstring issues can be pretty tough for speed guys like Tyreek Hill. We all know there is some serious chemistry between Mahomes and Kelsey, so even if the rest of the team is pretty sloppy, I think Mahomes will easily find Kelsey in the end zone there in week 1. So that's going to do it for the show. I hope everybody gets ready for this season. If you haven't had your draft yet, I hope you enjoy the guys that I like, guys that I'm targeting. Hope you enjoyed my week 1 preview. Super excited about this year. I hope we actually get a full year. So that's going to do it. Thanks again for tuning in, and as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin' or Stickin' is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin' or Stickin' is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.